We have all sorts. I have thyme that I just harvested, and we have essential oils, and then we have the tea. We have just all the time.
This is a fun one to learn about because it's like so common. I use it all the time.
That's the
I don't know
thing.
much about it.
It's so common. Everyone has access to it. It grows so easily, and it's so valuable. So by the end of today, you're going to be like, or the end of this class. So here again, we have a spa situation where if it's in the Thymus genus, it's going to be medicinal. And there's a lot of, hi, come on in. Oh, I think I just automatically just closed the door and then flipped it because that's what I do. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry, you're not in here at 10. You're like, boom, you're out of here. Yes, please. Thank you. And you can sit on the couch or at the table, whichever you like. So, and there's a lot of overlap here too. So while we're talking about thyme, and a lot of people kind of focus on thyme, there's an overlap in the family. So do you know what family thyme is? It's aromatic and shares a family with a lot of other aromatic plants. Like
the lavender family?
Like lavender, yep, and rosemary and sage and oregano and marjoram. So thyme, oregano, and marjoram are a grouping that I kind of want to point out here. And they're all in the mint family. So you were on the right track, absolutely. The mint family. So it's the Lamiaceae is the Latin name, but this is the mint family. So mint family plants, here, I'll pass around some plants for you to look at here.
Hi, so nice to see you. Thank you.
So botanically, if you look at a mint family plant, and I'll hold one up for folks. Mint, yeah, there you go, Sandra, and unprocessed, got it. But the internet delayed you, but you totally get the points. So if we look at the foliage of a mint plant, you'll see that the leaves are opposite. They're in pairs. So there's one on one side of the stem, and then there's a matching one on the other side of the stem, right? So those are called opposite leaves. You can also have leaves that are alternate, where they alternate the side of the stem that they grow on, and so it sort of steps up, right? So those are two of the primary leaf placement identifiers. And there are other plants that are aromatic and people tend to think are in the Lamiaceae family, but if you look at those leaves, you'll see that they are opposite. And so if they are opposite leaves, it cannot be whatever you think it is that's not in the mint family. Most commonly we see this in things like the Artemisias, sages, and mugworts, because certain ones, especially our native mugwort, right, our native California sagebrush, right, very aromatic, and so when you first smell it, you're like, oh, that's sage, it's related to sage, and rosemary, and you know, all of those, it's going to be in the Lamiaceae family. But you look at the leaves, and they're alternate leaves because it's in the Asteraceae family, in the sunflower family. So opposite leaves. Generally, if we look, this stem is a little bit too tiny, but you can sort of look at yours. The stem is generally on cross-section square. So if you cut it in half and looked at the stem, it is often square. And that's where the leaves come out, right? The opposite leaves on this side, and then you go up to the next node, and it's a switch 90 degrees, the leaves on this side. So square stem, opposite leaves, and often, though not always, very fragrant. So think of all of the plants that we were just talking about. So now, with the Lamiaceae family, we've talked often about tendencies in a family, so that you know, if you know that a plant is in a family, then you know that there are certain traits that you can associate with that. Before you know anything else about the plant, if you know that it's in the family, there are certain traits, right? We've talked about this before, and the trait that I find in Lamiaceae, and it's associated with those aromatics, is dispersing. It disperses stagnation. Lamiaceae family plants tend to break up, congestion of all different sorts. And so we have like lemon balm is a Lamiaceae family plant, right? And we use the lemon balm for depression, specifically for kind of dark, gloomy, stagnant types of depression, right? We use it to kind of brighten up and dispel, kind of break up that cold, damp mud kind of feeling. Rosemary stimulates circulation, breaks up stagnation in the circulatory system, and also in the brain, breaks up kind of brain fog, right? They work on breaking up stagnation in the digestive system, right? We use a lot of the mint family plants for bloating, gas, abdominal distension, poor digestion, right? So they warm and move. They have a lot of volatile oils, right? And volatile oils are oils that move. They rise, they float, and so they tend to disperse. But other qualities in the Lamiaceae besides the essential oils also tend to be associated with that dispersing quality. So horehound is an introduced plant, really common in our mountains. Horehound is used for lung congestion, right? Lung stagnation, when you have just lungs filled with goopy fluid. It's not because of the aromatics, but it is very good for dispersing those, motherwort for helping with dispersing kind of that tightness and congestion in the chest. So dispersing. And thyme is one of the big ones. So let me get you some tea. Thyme is one of my favorites for that quality of dispersing. What energetic pattern would you tend to think of associated with dispersing, with movement? If we look at the three primary ones, where we look at structure and we look at fluids, drying or cooling. So tensing or relaxing, drying or cooling, or heating, drying or moistening, and heating and cooling, the thermal structure. So when you have that kind of movement of stuff.
What was the third one? Tensing, relaxing, warming, cooling.
And drying and moistening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any ideas
I guess moisten.
about that warming, moistening? So they can definitely move fluids throughout the body. Definitely warming is one of those qualities, right? Warmth is movement. I mean, literally warmth is movement. Warmth is cells that are moving more quickly, right? And that causes warmth, that friction causes warmth. So when we have a plant that is dispersive, that is increasing that movement, we generally think of them as warming. Smarty pants unprocessed. So they can also be drying. So drying, moistening, right? They can help to regulate fluids in the body because they're moving fluids into and out of the body. For bodies that tend to be more dry, for bodies that tend to be more moist, or particularly bodies that have areas of moisture and areas of dryness, right? It can help to kind of equalize and normalize those because it's just kind of moving stuff around and dispelling that stagnation. And it's that stagnation, that stuckness, that often kind of doesn't allow for that dispersal of stuff. But yes, warming absolutely is what we look at. So again, Smarty Pants is peppermint then, warming or cooling. What do you think about that? If aromatics are warming, right, and warmth is stimulating, does peppermint feel warming or cooling to you?
It feels cool,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so stimulating that I could see it also being warming.
Absolutely, and that's the answer. Yes, so it has that cooling effect. Menthol, it has a high amount of menthol in it, and menthol is found in a lot of the Lamiaceae family plants in varying amounts. Right, it always has that kind of minty quality to it. And menthol is it feels cooling. You breathe in, and you have that icy flavor on the tissues. But you also have that warmth and movement. So energetically, the Lamiaceae family generally tends to be both warming and cooling, oftentimes, depending on what you're looking at, what chemistry you're looking at. If you're looking at just the chemistry of menthol, then it is going to be very cooling. But that's not the only chemistry of peppermint. It has a complex variety of energetics. So we'll oftentimes see that is Lamiaceae warming or cooling? Yes, it is. Yeah. Now, that being said, thyme does have more of a distinct energetic pattern. So what does it feel like to you drinking your tea here?
It's hot, but it feels drying. It feels drying.
Yeah, it is very hot. The water in here is very hot, and that's one of the important things about working with energetics and tasting them in tea form is you have to separate the energetic pattern of the plant from the energetic pattern of hot water, which is hot and moist. Right? And so it's going to make everything in it hot and moist. And you kind of have to go, okay, this is the water, but what else is there? Yeah. So it is very, very heating. And it is very, so tell me about that drying. You said it's very drying.
Yeah, I mean, even tasting it with the warmth, it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt dry around my tongue. That's kind of where I was feeling.
Yeah.
Me too. It feels astringent.
Yeah, there you go. There's the word that we're looking for. Yes, exactly. So it is drying to the tissues. It is astringent. So let's actually look at that too, because this is also sort of a duality of concept here, right? Kind of like the warming, cooling. And also, when you breathe in, can you taste that little bit of menthol in thyme? Get it on your tongue. It is for me, it is a very warming plant, but it has those tiny little molecules, those tiny, tiny, tiny little monoterpenes that are very volatile, and they dance off of the tissues. They just move away, and so they can disperse heat and they cool that down. So astringency, dryness. Astringency we put into the third energetic pattern category of structure, right? Because what's happening with astringency is those tannins, the compounds that are high in the plant, are grabbing onto proteins in the mouth, and as they grab onto the proteins, they astringe, they tighten them up. Right? So in doing that, they make those proteins thicker, they make them more stable, they increase the structural integrity of those tissues. Very much like if you take a raw egg, you look at the albumin, the white, the egg white, right? When it's raw, it's just kind of flubby, right? But if you heat it, or if you apply a high amount of acid to it, you coagulate those proteins and they become thicker. That is chemically very similar to what's going on when tannins come in contact with the mucous membranes inside your mouth and on your tongue. So we have that astringent drying effect, and all of a sudden those tissues that were open and kind of allowed fluids to move through them are shut, right? It's a more effective boundary. It's a more effective structure there. So this is a structural effect, is at that astringency. Now the effect on the tissues, the immediate tissues, there's a couple of different effects that happen. Dryness is an immediate effect, right? It feels very, very dry there. But if we look at the whole body or the underlying tissues, we see that astringent effect can be seen as drying if you're looking at it this way. But what if you're looking at it from this way? If you're looking at it from this way, we've closed those gates where moisture was moving out. And now we've created a more effective barrier to hold moisture in. So we can use astringency to increase the ability of tissues to hold moisture within them, even though they feel dry on the outside. So when we're looking at energetics, we oftentimes think of astringent as being dry, and oftentimes astringent plants are also drying because most plants are drying, and many plants have a lot of tannins and flavonoids in them, so they're astringent, right? But we think of those as two different things in herbal medicines. That astringency is a structural thing. And a perfect example of that effect, by the way, is diarrhea. In diarrhea, one of the primary concerns is dehydration, water loss, right? And so herbally, what we do with diarrhea, first of all, it's best not to treat it for a day or two, because diarrhea is also your body's way of like getting rid of something. Something's going on we don't want to hear. The most effective thing is just to let the body do itself and make yourself comfortable. But after a couple of days, if it's not going away, if it's a chronic problem, we need to step in and give some aid. And one of the primary things we do is we take astringent plants. Right? Because astringents are tightening up those tissues and they stop the fluid loss from the body. They allow the body to hold that fluid. Right? That's the best example of that kind of duality in how we think of astringency, whether that is drying or moistening. Very effective and helpful way to think about it. Hi from Newfoundland. Yay, hi, hi Terry. You're in Newfoundland, wow. Oh, glad you caught us too. Peppermint feels cooling, so yeah. So when it works both ways, does it work both ways for a person with the flu? Well, sure. So if we think of when we have the flu, we have fever, right? And peppermint can be really good for helping to kind of cool down that feeling of fever, especially if we apply it topically, because menthol is really cooling immediately to the skin. It's one of the best ways for cooling down someone. Hot flashes. Hot flashes are great. Stick menthol directly on the skin because it takes a long time for skin. Once the skin is in venting mode, right? The blood has kind of hit the surface and it's moving heat outward. It's really hard to kind of stop that and shunt the fluid back in. Menthol is a great way of doing that. There's that cooling effect, but also the stimulating effect in moving, congestion and stagnation, relieving nausea that the peppermint would have there, that would be very, very effective for something like the flu, where you do have that duality of symptoms. Boop, boop, boop. Sorry, I'm seeing people's comments and Mickey, hi. Chilly 37 feels 28. Michigan is in the house. Yeah. Alrighty. So, energetics aside. So this is an energetic pattern of bothness, right? It feels like a lot, but usually we think of thyme as a heating plant. It is very, very warming, even though it has some of those cooling qualities and dispersing qualities. This is definitely a plant that we think of as warming. Another example, actually, I was going to give for Sandra, is that if you drink a very large amount of hot peppermint tea, it will act as a diaphoretic. A diaphoretic is a plant that increases the opening up of those channels, right? And increases the movement of heat outward to help to disperse heat. Again, that dispersing of stagnation. So it'll make you sweat. And in doing that, it is cooling you down, right?
Would you recommend that for a fever?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we really like to use it. So if there's a fever and the person has a red face and they're sweating and their body is doing what it's supposed to, in fever is therapeutic. Fever is really, really beneficial. We mount a fever in order to create a hostile environment for pathogens, for various pathogens, most notably viruses, things that can only exist within a very narrow temperature range. Our body says, fine, you don't like it when we're 103 degrees, we're going to go up to 103 degrees, get out of here. And we do our bodies terrible disservices when we say, oh no, I've got a fever of 101 degrees. I have to bring that down to have the numbers be, underneath 100. And all of a sudden, the enormous effort that our body would put into mounting that fever, that's a lot of metabolic activity that a body puts out when it's already under a lot of stress from being sick. Now you've just said, whoop, you've dropped it down, and the virus generally loves that, and we see a real dramatic increase in the proliferation of the virus. So it's best not to cool body temperatures down, but it's a different concept when we're using diaphoretics, because when we're using a diaphoretic, we're looking to ease some of the heat of the fever, but we're doing it by opening up those channels and radiating that heat outward, right? Releasing the heat, not dampening it in the core. Continue with that in the core, because we want that. Definitely go into those areas where the viruses tend to hang out, in the in the sinuses and in the mucous membranes, but this outer surface, yeah, can just radiate that outward. So it's a very good thing to do if you have a flu, and especially if you have that opposite pattern, right, where you don't have the red face. Maybe you have like pale skin, and especially troubling if you don't really feel hot, or you're not sweating, you're not discolored, but you take a temperature, you can feel it, like there's heat and the temperature is elevated. That's a situation of great concern, and you really do want to like move that heat outward. And so you'd want to drink lots of diaphoretic teas. And so thyme is a great diaphoretic, and most of the Lamiaceae are great diaphoretics. We drink them hot in order to increase that outward movement of heat. And then also, because they are aromatic, those volatile oils are also strongly antimicrobial. And that's one of the things that thyme is most noted for, is its antimicrobial qualities. So it has two compounds in it. These are phenols. Two compounds. One is called thymol and carvacrol. And these two compounds are found in thyme. They're also found in oregano. And so you see there's a lot of talk about oregano oil as an antimicrobial agent. It is, absolutely it is, because it has these phenolic compounds in it and other things. Oregano is a wonderful plant, very closely related to thyme. Thyme does much the same thing, very similar effects, so we can use one or the other. So if we are using them for killing stuff, right? If we're using them for fighting some type of infection, whether it's fungal, because they're very effective for fungal infections, or viral or bacterial, these compounds are really, really strong and can be somewhat irritating to the skin. So we do have to be really cautious. These are toxic in high amounts, and they can cause side effects. And we often see those side effects when people are using the essential oils. When people use essential oil of oregano instead of just drinking oregano tea, particularly when people use essential oil of thyme, because there are different cultivars of thyme. So we look at the genus and species. So specifically, Thymus vulgaris is the official plant, right? Vulgaris, vulgar means common, right? So Thymus vulgaris is the official medicinal plant, and in this species there are numerous subspecies and what we call cultivars. Cultivars of plants are plants that are grown with specific qualities. So you can have a cultivar of a plant that has white and green foliage, right, instead of just green foliage. Or you can select for a certain secondary scent. So you see geraniums this way, right? Rose geranium and lemon geranium and nutmeg geranium and coconut geranium, all these different cultivars with different scents. Thyme has that too. Thyme is an ancient plant, and we have a very long relationship, humans and thyme. And so humans have been messing with thyme for a long time too, and so they've made a lot of different cultivars for different qualities, some of which are growing. They're low growing, or they're kind of woolly in appearance, or they have different looks. They have different flavor compounds. But if we use just Thymus vulgaris, this is just the common thyme. This is the medicinal one. Generally, if it is a cultivar, if it's something that has been selected for a certain trait, we may lose some of the medicinal effects from that plant. We may not. It's sometimes hard to tell. But if it, on the other hand, if what you have is a thyme that has some sort of trait to it, and if it tastes like thyme, then it acts like thyme and it's thyme. So go ahead and use it. But there are two cultivars that are associated with essential oil use that we do want to be really mindful of with thyme. So one of them is the CT is chemotype, linalool, and one is chemotype thymol. You will also, sometimes see a chemotype thujone, but we generally don't see that around. So generally the linalool chemotype and the thymol chemotype. Let me pour you some tea.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, yeah, fine.
Oh, would you grab me one of those?
Yeah.
Do you want both?
Sure. Yeah, isn't it nice? It's very
Thank you.
all right. So, thymol is one of these phenols that is potentially toxic and irritating to the skin. It is really strong as a disinfectant. It's a very, very strong. In fact, it is one of the best known uses of thymol is in the early 1900s, 1920s thereabouts. There was an outbreak of listeria, and a product was brought to market that was specific as a disinfectant to fight the listeria virus, a very, very, very problematic bacteria, not virus. And that was Listerine. Listerine was made specifically as an antimicrobial agent to kill the Listeria bacteria and a wide range of other bacterial infections. And the primary compound in Listerine was thymol when it was old school original Listerine. So thymol has a wide and long history of use as an industrial disinfectant. It's really, really effective. But when we have it applied to skin, when we inhale it, it can be really irritating. It is very, very heating. It's one of the heating compounds. One of the reasons why thyme is considered to be a hot herb is because of the thymol content. The higher that thymol content, the more heating it is. If you've taken oregano oil, you're taking concentrated thymol, concentrated carvacrol there, and it can be very, very, very heating. And that is a problem so going back to that, hi Teresa, is there a same duality with time, cooling and warming? So Sandra, yeah, so we talked about that a little bit. There is some of that, menthol, some of those menthol constituents, and also that diffusive moving effect that is equalizing. Can you clarify, are you saying CT is chemotype? Yes, yeah, sorry Terry, yes, CT is abbreviation for chemotype. So, so there are cultivars then of thyme that concentrate the thymol higher. We used to call this red thyme. So in older literature, older aromatherapeutic literature, you won't see chemotype thymol. That wasn't language that we used until relatively recently, but you'll see that called red thyme. And red thyme, or the chemotype thymol, is not one that I generally think is a good idea to use on your skin. Or in high concentration for aromatherapeutic purposes. This is a thymol chemotype thyme essential oil, so I'm going to send this around for you to smell it so you can kind of get a sense of the difference between them.
So that's a plant, like a separate plant that they.
It is. It's a subspecies. Yeah.
Is it a natural subspecies or was it?
No, it's cultivated, yeah. So cultivated and selecting for these characteristics, and over generations of the plant, you keep on selecting for the plant that has the higher amounts, and pretty soon you have widely varying chemistry, and that's why we can't really trust cultivars of plants to hold the same chemistry as the original plant. Because when you're selecting for one trait, you're missing all of the other complex chemistry of the plant. And did you end up with something that was medicinal? Maybe, maybe not, but it's not going to be the same. So, if you want to use that on surfaces, that's really, really great, right? So for use in non-body applications, I like Thymol, or for very strong short-term acute use. If there's a very virulent infection and you really want to use Thymol, then you can use it in a proper dilution for a short period of time, just being mindful of the fact that you're using something that is more toxic. So the linalool in older literature was often called white thyme. So white thyme versus red thyme in older literature. Nowadays, we generally refer to them as the linalool chemotype and the thymol chemotype. Linalool is another aromatic compound that we most commonly associate with lavender. So linalool is found in high amounts in lavender. It's one of the aromatic compounds. And so this then, and this is the white or the chemotype linalool. Yeah, you can kind of get that more floral quality to it. And so, as you would imagine, with something that has a chemistry that is more similar to lavender, this is the type of thyme that we can use on our skin, again, in proper dilution. Even if you're using the linalool chemotype, you would still want to have this in proper dilution because thyme is always going to be heating, because it's always going to also have these other heating compounds in it, right? But this is much safer to use on the skin or in the body. Now, we're generally not going to see these chemotypes available when we're looking at plants. These are really very specific to the aromatherapy industry. But because a lot of people are into aromatherapy, and because thyme, the red or the thymol chemotype, is really irritating and potentially problematic, I do like to refer to that.
It smells kind of lemony.
Lemony, yeah.
Does that make sense? It seems like something they would have in like pine sol.
Yeah. Well, then, and you are getting those other kind of piney like compounds in there too. Yeah.
Because pine sol usually has lemon in it.
Yeah. That's true.
Because the linalool,
Yeah.
will it have a similar effect as lavender, like in the nervous system?
So yeah, so use of thyme medicinally, generally just a regular thyme tea as we are drinking here has a nice balance of all of that. So it's going to have some linalool, it has some thymol, it has some carvacrol, it has some pinene in it, it has a lot of different compounds. And so one of the reasons that we use thyme is as an antispasmodic. It is a really effective antispasmodic. Thinking of that relaxation effect of lavender, here we have a plant that's strongly antispasmodic with a specificity for smooth muscle tissues. So when we talk about things that have an antispasmodic effect, relaxing muscles, we want to remember that there's different types of muscle in the body, and some plants have more of an affinity to skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle or smooth muscle, right? And so this plant has a smooth muscle specificity and a very strong antispasmodic quality. So smooth muscles are the muscles that line the organs, the hollow organs inside our body. So the bladder, the stomach, the intestines, the bronchioles, blood vessels, right? So the muscles that generally are under the control of our nervous system and not under our motor control, right? And they respond to nervous system stressors. So we get, vasoconstriction and bronchoconstriction and digestive problems. And yes?
What does pelvic floor fall under? Smooth muscle or skeletal?
That would be skeletal, right? Because it is under our control, right?
Oh,
we can
okay.
Right.
And then like bladder, uterus.
Bladder and the uterus, exactly. Perfect examples, yes. Yeah, and so thyme is really effective as an antispasmodic then for those types of tissues. It's very good for things like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic cramps, bloating, spasms in the intestinal tract, but also for bladder spasticity, for cystitis type conditions. It's very, very good when you have a bladder that is overreactive, oversensitive. You get a little bit of fluid in there, and all of a sudden it's like, I got pee, and you race to the bathroom, and there's like a teaspoon in there, right? Sometimes the bladder. Now, there's a combination of some nerve reactivity and other tissue reactivity, and this is really more the muscles, but muscles under the control of the nervous system. And so when there is a stress response to that, it's just kind of nice and going in and saying, hey, everything just calm down, right? So very calming effect for smooth muscle lined tissues. So the urinary tract, the intestinal tract, the stomach, the uterus, the lungs. Very good for opening up and relaxing the lungs. It's one of our primary plants that we use for respiratory tract conditions. And again, those aromatics, we're breathing in those essential oils, and those are going directly down into the alveolus of the lungs, right down in there, and having a direct contact antimicrobial effect, as well as being kind of absorbed and going into the tissues. And the aromatic compounds in thyme are excreted in the body. They're excreted in the body via the lungs and the urine. So this is part of what is called pharmacokinetics. Kinetics, movement of the therapeutic agents, right? So pharmacokinetics refers to how compounds move into, through, and out of our body. And we can kind of track their actions as they're moving out, right? If something is cleared via the liver, then it's going to have an effect on liver function. That may be beneficial, that may be harmful, that may point to an interaction between other medications that are involved in liver function, right? Can you think of plants like that? There's one in particular that's a
What's the question?
plants that if we're looking at pharmacokinetics, there's plants that are cleared via different organs, certain ones that are cleared via the liver and then have specific liver effects. Can you think of a plant that is milk thistle? Absolutely. Dandelion. I was thinking St. John's wort, because St. John's wort changes. It moves into and through the liver, and as it does that, milk thistle does this too. Dandelion does it too, but in a different way and with fewer ramifications for everything else. The St. John's wort activates liver detoxification pathways that have effects on other medications, right? And so you have these kind of domino effects. If you know the pharmacokinetics of a plant, and you know that it's cleared, for example, you're taking St. John's wort and you want to make sure that St. John's wort isn't interacting with the medication. If your medication, if you look up the pharmacokinetics and it says that it's cleared through the kidneys, then it's cleared through the kidneys. You don't have to worry about the St. John's wort having an effect on it, because that's not an issue.
So is that common? Like medications will list?
Yes.
the
Yeah, and they'll list specifically. This is a category when you're looking at, go on to the professional areas for drug things. Always go on to the professional ones instead of the consumer ones. And then it's generally way down at the bottom. But yeah, you'll see that. It's very, very helpful information. So thyme is cleared through the lungs and through the kidneys. And that shows some of the pharmacokinetics of clearing those aromatic compounds. Those move through the lungs and move through the kidneys and through the bladder So we see immediate effects of antimicrobial effects, astringent effects. We get those immediate effects from the steam and from the contact, but we also can follow these constituents through the body and out of the body. And as they are excreted out of the body, they have a secondary effect on those tissues. And one of the things that's really beneficial is that thyme being excreted through the lungs, when you're drinking it as a tea, you're getting secondary effects when it's cleared out of the body, with more activation of the lungs and more activation of the urinary tract, and that's where you get that that pain relieving effect, anti-spasmodic effect, and then antimicrobial effect on those tissues. So very, very effective for spastic infectious conditions of those particular organs, along with all of the other ones, right?
So because of that, will the thyme never make it to like the lower intestinal tract because it passes through the?
Yeah, it's a great question. Generally, aromatics don't make it intact in large amounts into the intestinal tract. Because there's just so much going on just in the stomach alone, right? In the stomach and the duodenum, where you have a lot of heat, a lot of movement, a lot of kind of stuff going on. And then in the small intestine, you're getting absorption, but you're also getting that pH shift. There's just a whole lot of chemistry and then a lot of absorption of stuff, because the small intestine is where absorption happens. So by the time stuff gets to the large intestine, there's very little aromatic stuff that makes it down there. So when the qualities that you're looking for are specific to the essential oils, no. It's likely that taking it as a tea, it's not going to be there. But you can get what are called enteric coated capsules. So enteric coated capsules have a special protein on the outside that does not break down in an acidic environment. It breaks down in an alkaline environment. So it protects it through the acidity of the stomach, right? And it's not until the pH changes, in the duodenum, the pancreas starts to neutralize all the acidity from the stomach, and as soon as that neutralization happens, then it releases. And so it's past that area, it's in the small intestine, so you get a lot more making it into the large intestine with enteric-coated capsules. And you can find combinations of like peppermint and thyme and chamomile and fennel that are really, really effective for spasticity in the colon, right? Specifically in the bowel, in the large intestine. It's the only way to get them down there. Other than, some people use them in like colonics and suppositories and things like that. But even then, you're only getting into the lower area of the colon. It's really hard to get all the way up into that colon. It's best, top down. But enteric-coated capsules are really, really effective. They're almost always with a peppermint base, because there's been a tremendous amount of research on the use of peppermint oil in an enteric-coated capsule for treatment of IBS and related spastic colon conditions. But I've seen them with thyme in them, and again with the chamomile and fennel oil and all of that. Really effective. So good if you have an old dog at home. If you have an old farting dog and they're just old and farting and there's nothing you can do because they're just an old dog, the enteric-coated capsules, if they're a large enough dog, they're dosed for humans, so you couldn't give this to like a dachshund. But we had a very old, very farting dog who loved nothing more than to lie on our feet wherever we sat. He was like on our feet. Bless his heart. But we started giving him enteric-coated peppermint oil capsules, and and we got little bursts of minty.
Minty farts.
Oh, that's so much better though.
So much better. So much better. So you knew, you knew there was farting going on, but you didn't mind it so much. Although you did mind it a little bit, because it was also kind of weird to go, oh, it's minty. Okay. Let's see. What else? Where else are we? So you might notice a mild numbing effect also in the mouth and on the throat, right? So here we have that kind of that anesthetic effect that thyme has. Very good for sore throats, very good for laryngitis, tonsillitis, any kind of irritation, inflammation, pain, thyme, as well as sage, right? Sage, another Lamiaceae. So there's some crossover there between the use of thyme and sage for that astringent quality, tightening and firming up those red, swollen, inflamed tissues, and also anesthetizing that tissue. You can make great cough syrups with thyme. It makes one of the best cough syrups around. Thyme and lemon just make a very, very, very strong infusion of thyme and lemon in honey. Strain it out, and you can heat the honey up a little bit to warm it to extract that, and strain it out, and that is a super tasty and very, very effective cough syrup.
Do you use dried or fresh?
Either one. Either one. It's easier to, if you have fresh, and I've got some out there if you want to take some home. You can just like put this in the honey whole and then just pull it out. And so it's a little bit easier to get out. If you are using the fresh, well, we'll add a little bit of moisture into your honey, which is fine. You can allow for a little bit of moisture. If you're using lemons, that's also going to add some moisture into the honey, unless you're using dried lemon peel. And the lemon, of course, is going to add more moisture than the thyme. If you add a lot of water-holding stuff, you're going to increase, of course, the water content of your honey. And so that's something that you want to consider when you're making a syrup like that, right? If you want to make it really, really shelf-stable and last for a long time, minimize the water coming in. Use just the lemon peel and maybe a little bit of the flesh. Maybe wilt your herbs a little bit to drive off some of the moisture. But if you don't mind, you're going to be using it pretty quickly, you're going to keep it in the refrigerator, you just make a small batch, go to town, however you want. There's no specific recipe, just throw them in there, heat up the honey, taste it. Does it need more? Throw some more in there. But it's very high in essential oils. Thyme, it has a very, very high concentration of essential oils, so it's very quick and very easy to infuse thyme into almost anything. It's not something, if you're making a tincture or a glycerite or a fused honey or anything like that, it's done in a couple of days, especially if you throw a little bit of heat on there to encourage the movement of those aromatics. You can leave it in longer if you're making an extract and you want to get kind of a wider range of constituents out of there, right? There's a lot of flavonoids, there's a lot of other compounds that are beneficial in thyme. But if what you're looking for is something to anesthetize the tissues and fight infection, and you're just making a quick honey syrup, then yeah, a day, 2 days with heat, half an hour, and let it cool down and you're done. I love that.
It'd be hard to strain it, right? I mean, you
And that's the other thing is that, thank you, that when you're using the fresh, when you're adding in the lemon and all of that higher amount of liquid makes it easier to strain. If you have everything dried, it is very hard to strain unless you heat it up. When you heat up honey at about 140 degrees, there's a shift and it becomes very watery, and then you can strain out those, but it still is a little bit difficult if you're using the cut and dried
But
thyme.
you could just eat, if it was in there dry, you could still just eat it. And
You could
get
just
the
eat
same
it.
benefits.
It's a little bit fibrous, but you absolutely could. You could also just take like spoonfuls and put it into like hot water,
Yeah.
and reconstitute like a tea, and then the herbs are going to kind of float down to the bottom. Or not float down to the bottom, that's not what float means. Sink down to the bottom. And then you're right, just drink it and discard the rest. Yeah. Or eat them. Let's see. It is a nervine as well, so it has, again, kind of similar to sage in its ability to strengthen and increase the resilience of the nervous system. So this is a plant that historically was associated with courage and strength. In fact, that's thymos, the Greek word from which we get the Latin name thyme. Thymos means strength, right? So this has always been known as a symbol of strength and courage. And it is something that is nourishing and strengthening and increasing to the resilience and the strength of your nervous system. It's also said to be helpful in shifting into a parasympathetic mode, helping us to shift out of that sympathetic dominant fight or flight state, right? So drinking thyme can help us to take us out of that stress state and into a calm state. I see information, wondering if it would work on my husband. What book would I find info on pharmacokinetics? Pharmaceutical information on medications, and then a good book on herbal pharmacology. Simon Mills and Carrie Bone, they're Australian herbalists, and they made a great book called Principles and Practices of Phytotherapy. That is a very good book for pharmacokinetics. What are your recommendations to offset the heating, drying effects? Thank you so much for bringing this up. On a sore throat, I remember for UTIs, you mentioned corn silk and couchgrass, of course, marshmallow. Abahita, yes, that is really important. And German commissionees have pharmacokinetics. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, so the commissionee monographs is what she's referring to there. Anytime a plant has a strong energetic pattern, we always want to be concerned, as Abahita said, for tissues that are already presenting as hot and dry. This is a heating, drying plant, right? So if we have a hot, dry throat and we're using it for a painful throat, right, we can relieve the pain, but also make the tissue state worse, because we are increasing that heat and dryness in tissue that's already hot and dry, right? And so, yeah, okay, we anesthetized it, but as soon as that wears off, we're going to be even more, and we're just going to be making it worse. So how would we, that's a great question, how would we modify that?
Well, would the honey help?
Honey absolutely helps. Honey is a moistening compound in its own right. So that's a very important thing, is that what we're using as the medium also contributes to the energetics. Water does, yes, but honey is even more. Oil is also. And so you can make an infused oil of the plants. And oftentimes we don't, in Western herbalism, we often don't think of infused oils for internal use topically on tissues. Ayurvedic practitioners love oils, right? Love oil topically, using it internally on mucous membranes. Oil applied to mucous membranes can be really, really nice. So a sore throat, using not the essential oil, but take some olive oil, right? And just infuse some thyme in your olive oil. That's going to be yummy. You can use it on like all your cooking, but you can also take a spoonful of that with a sore throat, and you have a combination of the oil kind of coating and protecting the throat, sort of acting like a mucous membrane barrier, where that mucous membrane barrier isn't there because it's been disrupted by that heat and dryness. You could use honey, absolutely. What else could you do?
Could you do like a marshmallow, like a cold tea?
Yeah, you can use mucilaginous plants. So corn silk, couchgrass are specific to the urinary tract. Marshmallow is a great one. Slippery elm is a great one. Just throwing a little bit of those, and that's always a good idea to kind of think of that. You already said marshmallows, so you already knew. Marshmallows are the plant to throw into something. If it's too dry, throw in marshmallow. It's going to moisten it. It's just.
But you can't do that in a hot tea, right?
You can do it in a hot tea. So marshmallow contains a number of different starchy compounds. One of those is mucilage. And mucilage likes to be extracted in cold water, right? So a lot of people do cold water extracts of marshmallow. But mucilage isn't the only starch in marshmallow, and all of the starches in marshmallow are hydrating. All starches in general are hydrating. So there's we tend to think of slimy things as being the moistening things, but it's more than just slime. Slime's just one type of starch that holds moisture. All the starches generally hold moisture. And so marshmallow, one of the problems with marshmallow, and you may have noticed this online, So sometimes when you make a cold infusion of marshmallow, it's just beautiful, slimy and beautiful and gorgeous. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you'll do a cold water extract, and at the end of that, it's like, okay, well, I can taste the marshmallow, but it's not slimy. And sometimes that can be because your marshmallow's a little bit old, but this is a really stable compound. It's okay if it's a little bit old. Marshmallow can be really old and still be pretty effective when it comes to the starches in it, because starches are just really, really stable compounds. But that mucilage can kind of be bound up with some of those other starches, and so they're not going to release with cold water because other starches release with hot water. So what my preference is with marshmallow, just to get the most out of it, is I like to do an initial hot water extraction and then let it cool down. Because as soon as the temperature drops down, that's going to release the mucilage. It's just kind of hanging out. It's like bound up, and different types of starches release at different temperatures. Sometimes some of the polysaccharides we've talked about and things like astragalus root, right? They take an hour of simmering, or reishi, right? Medicinal mushrooms. They take an hour of simmering before those long chains of sugars can relax and move into solution, right? So some need heat and some need cold. And so if you do hot and then down to cold, you just get a wider range, right? So yes, but that is a really important point. If getting the maximum amount of moisture in there is really important for you, then you'd absolutely want to do a thyme and marshmallow infusion, but then let it infuse for all that time to get cold so that you maximize that extraction. Because if you don't, you'll get some of the starch, you'll get some of the moisture in there, but mostly you'd be getting the thyme and those astringent qualities, right?
So you don't ruin it if you heat it.
Absolutely don't ruin it. No.
And then what happens if you add that to honey? Is it just too watery? Would it be like marshmallow and honey?
Marshmallow and honey makes the weirdest slime. You should try it. You should try it, because everyone should try it. It's bizarre because honey has about 50% water. And any water is going to react with mucilage, because that mucilage loves water. It's just going to find water and grab onto it. It won't do anything if you mix it with oil, because mucilage doesn't react with oil. If you mix it with alcohol, it'll actually damage, it'll coagulate and drop down to the bottom. But if you mix it in with honey, the honey portion of the honey is thick and slimy, and then you get this thick slime in there, and it just makes it, yeah, it's effective. It makes a really good paste for the throat, but it's kind of a strange consistency. It's not bad. But you wouldn't want to do a water extraction then add that if you wanted a shelf stable. Yeah. Malvas. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Use your local Malvas. Absolutely. Yep. Honey and elecampane. Yeah. Honey makes everything better. I love honey. Another way to use, or reason to use thyme, real quick, like it's already noon. Thyme is really effective for excessive oil production in the skin. So for oily skin, for acne, for seborrheic dermatitis, dandruff in the scalp, thyme is really, really effective for scalp and skin disorders. Infusing it into vinegar is very good, because vinegar is also really, really good for those. So heat up vinegar, throw thyme in it, let it cool down, strain it, and you have just a really, really great treatment. Diluted appropriately, because vinegar undiluted is going to be too harsh on the skin, but dilute that in like a 1 to 4, 1 to 5 dilution, and use that topically on the skin, or as a rinse for the scalp for any kind of scalp disorders. Really, really effective. Thyme is, there was a study that was done comparing thyme to benzoyl peroxide. Benzoyl peroxide is a common compound used as an acne treatment. It was kind of the thing while I was growing up for acne treatments, and they found that thyme extract was as effective as benzoyl peroxide in treatment of acne. And it's interesting because if you think of of an acne eruption, that's a lot of heat, right? There's redness and heat and swelling and inflammation, infection. These are all hallmarks of heat. And generally, we would suggest don't put heat on heat, right? That's not an appropriate energetic combination. We usually want to cool that heat. But thyme, because of that complexity of chemistry, because it isn't just heating or cooling, it is both. It has it kind of reins itself in, and it's very, very effective for that. So diluted into a carrier and then applied topically. We wouldn't want to use undiluted essential oil on there, or just teas, right? Teas are good. Let's see. So I think that is about it. Yep. Antifungal, really effective antifungal, really good for chronic fungal infections. Again, the thyme vinegar is a great antifungal. Thyme vinegar is good stuff to have around for just spraying on any kind of skin problem. For athlete's foot, thyme vinegar is really, really great for both applying to your feet and also for spraying into your closed-toed shoes. Treatment of athlete's foot is multifactorial. It requires just a whole bunch of interventions on a whole bunch of in a whole bunch of areas, repeated, and patience.
What kind of vinegar is best for that?
Apple cider vinegar is great. If you're putting it on your body, I like to use apple cider vinegar. Or, there's a lot of artisanal vinegars out now. Not artisanal in a bougie way, but things like there's coconut vinegar and there's rice vinegars. You can use rice vinegars, but you want that type of a unrefined, unpasteurized whole vinegar, because that all of the compounds that are produced in the fermentation, those are the therapeutic compounds. White vinegar, distilled white vinegar, is generally often made by getting synthetic acetic acid. Acetic acid is the type of acid that makes vinegar vinegary. So you can just get acetic acid and throw it into water and you have chemically white vinegar, right? It's not that it actually went through a fermentation process and all of that. It's just, chemically, it's a vinegar. There you go. There's a 5% acetic acid solution. It's great for cleaning. I love it for cleaning. There are a few things. And I don't like apple cider vinegar for cleaning because it's brown. And if you spray it on your shower curtains, you're spraying brown on your shower curtains. So the white wine so around your house, white, but if it's going on your body, I like to use, or in your body, I like to use the apple cider vinegar. And you can use it internally, you can use it on your skin, you can use it on animals. It's great stuff.
What about for warts? Can you use thyme on the warts?
You could. Warts are viral. And thyme is a strong antiviral. What I would do is generally I would use an undiluted. You want to use it strong. And coat the area around the wart. I used to have a wart right there, so that's when it's like that. And I got rid of it by taping garlic on overnight. I cut a clove of garlic in half and taped it on my finger overnight. And when I got up in the morning, my finger was a massive wound. It was horrible. Raw garlic taped directly on your skin is such a bad idea. It's a horrible idea. I'm amazed I still have my fingerprints on there. But it got rid of the wart. But it wasn't worth it. Turned out later, what you're supposed to do is you protect the tissue around it. So you put a layer of like salve around, and then you just apply it directly on that area. I don't know. I think it would be worth a try if I had a wart and I had some time. I would absolutely try that. I would even probably try the Thymol, because you are trying to kill something. And generally we don't want to, and we've talked about this before in class, we don't want to equate health with killing stuff, right? For so long, the language around health was how much stuff could you kill and get to a state of purity, in your body, kill all the bad stuff, and you get clean, and then you're healthy. And we know that is so not how our bodies are built. So we want to be really mindful when we're using something that's made to kill stuff, whether it's raw garlic or thymol or oregano oil, the way that it's being sold. There's so many herbs, so many things still have that old mindset of take this because it's going to kill all the things that are like, that's not health. Health is balance, and because you're going to have the viruses that cause warts, you're going to have candida, you're going to have all the horrible organisms are always around us. And it's just, if there's a reason that has been able to gain supremacy there's a whole long conversation about what was happening, that your immune system and your tissues were not sufficient to be in balance, and how do we regain that balance, right? So there's a big, huge conversation there. But also, sometimes you just want to kill stuff. And that's great, as long as we just kind of remember, this isn't the default mindset that we go to. Even though it is often, look at the language of people who are selling stuff or selling you concepts. It is amazing how often you can find that is the underlying message still to this day when we know better, because that's a language of drama, right? That's drama and excitement, and it makes you not like your body, and oh gosh, I'm dirty, and I have to purge myself and cleanse. Yeah, it's a twisted little mindset, but humans are twisted little creatures, and we just like stuff like that. So anyway, that's thyme. So go play with some thyme. It grows really, really well. It grows really well here. Sorry, I always forget. I'm in Southern California. Not a lot of you all are in Southern California. Why is it that thyme and oregano should be used in small amounts for pregnant bodies? Oh, because of this very strong, warming, stimulating effect. Imagine if you have a fetus in here, then you want that fetus to be calm and chill, and everything is quiet there, right? If we're moving uterine energy, we're moving blood flow in that pelvic region, where that can make for, especially in a body that has a history of miscarriage or maybe is the first pregnancy. But generally, we don't want to be using really warming, stimulating herbs like that. But also, thymol and carvacrol those phenols are toxic. Now, the dose makes the poison, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't make some thyme tea and drink it for your cough, your very bad cough, or use thyme better, using thyme in your food, right? Some of that thyme infused oil drizzled on your veggies. So you'd want to be using it in a food form and not a medicinal form. But yeah, thyme and oregano are strong medicine, and so we want to be just quiet for that. Terry, I loved being in North Carolina. Terry, it was so gorgeous, and I'm so looking back. My daughter-in-law says that I need to come back in May. So in May, I'm going back to North Carolina, and I hope to see you then. That would be fun. Next week, I looked it up this time so I could say next week is cinnamon, and then the week after that is ginger, because it's the holiday season. So we have to do cinnamon and ginger. So we'll do cinnamon and ginger. We'll talk about the differences between cinnamons and cassias, and how to tell the difference if your source doesn't know what kind of cinnamon they're selling you. And the reason for them is some cool studies on cinnamon. And yeah, sweet, Terry. I see what you did. Cinnamon glyceride. Oh, delicious. Yeah. All right. I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.